The human inherited the king's daughter, and the Galactic Council didn't see this coming. To most people, space was silent and cold, but to Ethan, it was a place of opportunity and curiosity. For years, he had traveled from one star system to another, exploring uncharted worlds, mapping asteroid fields, and occasionally helping colonies in need. He had never sought fame or power. He was just a human, living among aliens whose civilizations had flourished for millennia. On this particular day, Ethan was returning from a minor scouting mission near the Orion cluster. He had been contracted to survey a small planet for rare minerals, nothing extraordinary. Yet, when his shuttle docked at the Orion spaceport, the usual routine was broken by a group of solemn-looking officials waiting for him. They wore uniforms marked with the insignia of the Royal Council of Orion, the governing body of the Orion cluster. "Ethan Clark," one of them asked, his voice calm but firm. "You are required at the Royal Palace immediately." Ethan frowned. He had never received a royal summons in his life. "I think there's been a mistake," he said politely. "I'm just a surveyor. I'm not involved in politics." "No mistake," the official replied. "Your presence is requested by Princess Liara herself." Ethan's curiosity got the better of him. He followed the officials into a sleek transport that raced across the city. The palace appeared on the horizon, a majestic structure of shining crystal and polished metals. He had seen alien palaces before, but none had the elegance and weight of history that this one carried. Inside, he was escorted to a grand hall where Princess Liara awaited. She was unlike any being Ethan had met. While most aliens in the Orion cluster had features that made humans seem fragile, Liara carried herself with grace and quiet strength. Her eyes, a deep violet, seemed to measure him, yet there was no malice in her gaze. "You must be Ethan Clark," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was an intensity that made Ethan straighten instinctively. "I suppose you are wondering why you are here." "I am," Ethan admitted. "Honestly, I have no idea." Liara nodded as if she had expected his answer. "My father, King Velaryon, passed away recently. Before his death, he left a will. It is unusual. He named you as my guardian and heir to certain responsibilities should anything happen to me before I am ready to rule." Ethan blinked, unsure he had heard correctly. "Me? A human, but I don't even live here. I'm not part of your family. I don't even know the first thing about governing a kingdom, let alone the Orion cluster." "That is exactly why he chose you," Liara said softly. "Humans think differently. They are adaptable. My father believed that a human mind could see possibilities others might overlook." Ethan felt a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "I'm honored, but I don't think I can do this." Liara's gaze softened. "You have no choice. The council will challenge me if I try to assume full responsibility too soon. They will not respect a child ruler without a capable guardian." Before Ethan could respond, the doors to the hall opened, and representatives of the Galactic Council entered. Their forms varied widely. Some were tall, spindly creatures with long limbs. Others were squat and armored in natural exoskeletons. A few glowed faintly, like walking bioluminescent lights. All of them wore expressions of skepticism and authority. "Princess Liara," the lead counselor said, his voice echoing in the hall, "we have been informed of this unprecedented arrangement, a human as your guardian. The council must question the validity of this decision." Ethan swallowed hard. He had faced dangerous creatures, navigated treacherous space storms, and solved problems that would have challenged entire fleets. But being questioned by a council of alien elders was new territory. "I understand your skepticism," Ethan said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I don't know your customs, but I am willing to learn and to do my best to protect Princess Liara and serve in whatever role you deem necessary." The council murmured among themselves, a mix of alien sounds and mental transmissions. One of them stepped forward. "Learning is not enough. You must demonstrate worthiness. You are an outsider, an untested human. Why should we accept your authority over this princess and by extension over the kingdom? Ethan took a deep breath. He looked at Liara, who nodded slightly, giving him silent encouragement. He realized that his usual skills, problem-solving, adaptability, courage, would be tested not in space but here, in the intricate dance of politics and diplomacy. "I cannot claim to be one of you," he said, his voice firm. "But I can promise to act with integrity, courage, and intelligence. I can make decisions not for myself, but for the good of Princess Liara and her people. I may be human, but humans have a history of overcoming impossible odds. I will prove that a human guardian can be worthy." The council fell silent. They had heard similar promises before, from alien nobles who later failed or betrayed their duties. Ethan sensed that words alone would not suffice. Actions would be needed, and soon. Liara stepped forward. "Ethan will accompany me to the royal archives and the council chambers. There you will witness the decisions my father made and understand the weight of what has been entrusted to him. It is not a role given lightly, and it requires wisdom, bravery, and fairness." Ethan followed Liara through the palace corridors, marveling at the architecture, the fusion of alien artistry and technology. As they walked, he asked, "Princess, what exactly does being my guardian mean? Am I supposed to make decisions for you?" Liara shook her head. "Not to make decisions instead of me, but to guide and protect me until I am ready to rule. And if necessary, to stand against those who would use my youth to manipulate the kingdom." They reached a massive chamber filled with scrolls, data crystals, and holographic records. "Here," Liara said, "you can study the political history of the Orion cluster, the alliances my father formed, and the enemies he kept at bay. The council will test your understanding of these matters." Ethan felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He had never studied politics, and the histories of alien civilizations were complex beyond anything on Earth. But he reminded himself of one principle he had learned traveling the stars: adapt, observe, and act intelligently. If he could apply that now, perhaps he could survive this challenge. Their study was interrupted by a sudden alert. A small screen flickered to life, showing a remote system outside the palace. A rogue faction had begun mobilizing fleets near the edge of Orion space, taking advantage of the recent instability. Liara's eyes widened. "They're moving faster than expected. If they attack the inner planets, many will suffer before the council can respond." Ethan's mind raced. "Then we act immediately. Delay will cost lives. We can't wait for council approval to respond." Liara hesitated. "Do you think the council will approve?" "Approval can wait. Action cannot," Ethan said. "Trust me." Humans have a habit of doing what must be done, even if it surprises everyone. With Liara's reluctant agreement, Ethan coordinated a rapid response. Using the palace communication systems, he dispatched warnings to the planets at risk, organized defensive measures, and suggested strategies to delay the rogue fleets. His knowledge of space navigation and unconventional tactics allowed them to outmaneuver the attackers temporarily, buying critical time. Hours later, the immediate threat had been contained. The rogue forces retreated, confused by the human ingenuity they had not anticipated. News of Ethan's actions spread quickly across the council and the palace. Many of the alien counselors who had doubted him began to reconsider. Liara looked at him with a mix of admiration and relief. "I did not expect this from a human. My father might have been right." Ethan smiled, exhausted but determined. Sometimes, being human is about seeing possibilities others don't. But this is just the beginning. If I am to be your guardian, I need to learn fast, and the council will need to see that I am capable in more than just emergencies. As the council gathered to discuss the incident, Ethan realized that his journey had only just begun. Being a human in the heart of alien politics was dangerous, unpredictable, and overwhelming. but it was also the greatest challenge he had ever faced, and he intended to rise to it. The stars outside the palace glimmered in silent approval, as if the universe itself was watching this human who dared to inherit more than anyone had imagined. Ethan Clarke had survived the first day at the Orion Palace, and it had already changed him. He had faced the council, guided Princess Liara, and handled a sudden threat from rogue fleets. But he knew that the hardest trials were still ahead. The council was not forgiving. They were patient and cunning, skilled in politics and manipulation. Winning their respect would require more than courage. It would require wisdom, insight, and the ability to adapt. The next morning, Ethan was summoned to a meeting with Princess Liara and her senior advisors. The room was circular, lined with hollow screens that displayed the current status of every planet in the Orion cluster. Alien officials sat around the table, some with multiple limbs, some hovering slightly above the floor, all watching Ethan intently. Liara spoke first. "Ethan, the council has decided that before they officially recognize your guardianship, you must prove your competence. This is not just about knowledge. They want to see leadership, judgment, and the ability to act under pressure." Ethan nodded, keeping his tone calm. "I understand. I'll do my best." An advisor with a transparent head and glowing brain matter leaned forward. "Your best may not be enough, human. Many outsiders have tried to navigate the council and failed. Do you know why?" Ethan shook his head. "Because you lack understanding of our customs, our history, and the subtle ways in which influence is exercised. It is not enough to act boldly. One must act correctly, in accordance with tradition and strategy." Ethan took a deep breath. He had faced hostile planets, dangerous space storms, and deadly creatures. But the politics of a 1,000-year-old interstellar monarchy was unlike anything he had experienced. He realized that to succeed, he would need to observe carefully, ask the right questions, and think in ways that combined human creativity with respect for alien tradition. Over the next few days, Ethan immersed himself in the palace archives. The records were vast, including centuries of political treaties, alliances, trade negotiations, and conflicts. He read everything with the meticulous attention of a scholar, but he also looked for patterns, for weaknesses, for areas where human ingenuity could provide solutions the council had never considered. During one session, he noticed something troubling. A neighboring system, Veyron, had been quietly amassing fleets near Orion borders. Their movements were subtle, almost invisible in the standard reports. Yet the pattern was clear to Ethan. They were waiting for the cluster to weaken before striking. He brought his findings to Liara. "Princess, Veyron isn't just observing. They're preparing to take advantage of any instability. If we don't act, the inner planets will be in danger before the council even realizes what's happening." Liara's eyes widened. "You mean another attack? But the council has not authorized any preemptive measures." Ethan leaned forward. "I know, but sometimes waiting for authorization is a risk we can't take. We can't let fear of protocol cost lives. We need to be proactive, not reactive." Liara hesitated but then nodded. "Then we prepare, but we must do this carefully. The council is watching. Any misstep could be used against us." Ethan smiled slightly. Humans had a way of turning challenges into opportunities, and this was no different. He spent the next several days organizing the defense of the vulnerable planets. He communicated directly with local leaders, coordinated supply lines, and designed strategies using methods unfamiliar to the aliens. His approach was unconventional, but it worked. When the rogue fleets moved, they encountered resistance far stronger than they anticipated. Small defensive squads, cleverly positioned and coordinated, delayed the enemy long enough for reinforcements to arrive. The attack failed, and Veyron forces retreated, confused and frustrated by the unorthodox tactics. The news of Ethan's success spread quickly throughout the cluster. Council members who had doubted him began to murmur in surprise. Humans, they realized, were unpredictable, but in a good way. Ethan's actions had saved thousands of lives and prevented a crisis that could have escalated into war. But not everyone was impressed. Some counselors saw his success as a threat to their authority. One of the senior members, a reptilian figure named Turak, openly challenged Ethan during a council session. "A human intervenes and prevents disaster," Turak said, his voice sharp. "Yet he has no experience, no lineage, no understanding of our customs. We must consider whether it is wise to allow an outsider this level of influence." Ethan stood calmly. "I acted to protect lives, not to gain influence. If protecting innocent people is a threat, then perhaps our priorities need rethinking." The council murmured, divided. Some nodded in agreement, while others exchanged worried glances. Ethan had made his point. Humans were different, but sometimes different was exactly what was needed. Over the next weeks, Ethan continued to prove himself. He studied diplomacy, learning how to negotiate with alien leaders who often communicated in ways humans struggled to understand. He learned to anticipate moves, to read the subtleties of alien body language, and to think several steps ahead. Liara watched him closely, impressed by his growth. "You adapt faster than anyone I've seen," she said one evening as they reviewed reports. "You understand people, even when their motivations are hidden." Ethan shrugged. "It's part of being human. We survive by noticing patterns and finding solutions, even when the rules aren't clear. The council will see that soon enough." Then a new challenge emerged. One of the counselors, a seemingly loyal advisor to Liara, was discovered to be secretly communicating with Veyron. They were plotting to undermine the princess's authority, hoping to create a situation that would justify a council-led intervention. Ethan's human intuition caught the irregularities. Small discrepancies in reports, inconsistencies in communication logs, subtle timing errors. These were things the aliens overlooked because their systems relied on centuries-old procedures. Ethan investigated quietly, confirming his suspicions. He presented the evidence to Liara. "This advisor is working against you," he said. "If we don't act, the council might unknowingly support their plan." Liara nodded grimly. "Then we expose them, but carefully. We cannot give Turak or others the excuse to dismiss your role." Together, they devised a plan. Using a combination of stealthy observation, intercepted communications, and careful timing, they gathered undeniable proof of the advisor's betrayal. Then, during a council session, Liara presented the evidence. The room erupted in chaos. The advisor tried to deny the accusations, but the proof was irrefutable. Council members debated furiously, and some attempted to argue procedural technicalities, but Ethan's earlier successes and Liara's authority ensured that the betrayal could not be ignored. The council had no choice but to remove the advisor from their position. Ethan watched quietly, understanding that every move he made now was being scrutinized. His human methods, practical, sometimes unconventional, were slowly earning respect, but he had to remain vigilant. As the days passed, Ethan's reputation grew. Stories of the human who saved planets, uncovered conspiracies, and outmaneuvered seasoned counselors spread through the Orion cluster. Citizens and officials alike began to see him not as an outsider, but as a capable guardian who brought fresh perspectives and solutions. Yet Ethan remained humble. He knew that success was not a guarantee of safety. Politics was an ever-changing game, and new threats could arise at any moment. But he also knew that he had proven something vital. Humans could stand shoulder to shoulder with the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Liara approached him one evening as he reviewed reports in the palace library. "Ethan, the council is beginning to accept you," she said softly. "But this is just the beginning. There will be more challenges, and we will need to work together to face them." Ethan smiled faintly. I know, and I'm ready. Being human means facing the unknown, and this is the biggest unknown I've ever encountered. But I won't back down. Not for the princess, not for the people, not for the galaxy. Their conversation was interrupted by an alert. A distant planet had detected unusual activity near its orbit. Ethan studied the data carefully. This could be a natural phenomenon, or it could be a test from another faction. Either way, we need to prepare. Liara looked at him, determination in her eyes. Then we act. Together, Ethan felt a surge of purpose. He had come from a small planet called Earth, a human in a galaxy far older and more complex than anything he had ever imagined. Yet he was no longer just a visitor or an observer. He was a participant, a guardian, and a symbol of human capability. The next council session was intense. Ethan had to defend his actions, propose strategies, and demonstrate understanding of alien politics. He spoke clearly and confidently, using examples from his experiences to illustrate the effectiveness of human reasoning. The council listened, some skeptical, some curious, and some impressed. By the end of the session, a consensus was forming. Ethan had proven that a human could not only survive in the complex environment of interstellar politics, but could excel. His adaptability, intelligence, and courage had turned skepticism into cautious respect. That night, Ethan and Liara walked through the palace gardens. Stars shone brightly above them, and the gentle breeze carried the faint hum of distant cities. "You've done well," Liara said quietly. "The council may not fully trust humans yet, but they cannot ignore you either. You've changed the way they see possibility." Ethan looked up at the stars, thinking of Earth, of the simple life he had known, and of the vast galaxy now open before him. "I'm just a human," he said, "but humans can surprise even themselves, and maybe we can surprise the galaxy too." Liara smiled. "Then we'll face the future together, and the galaxy will see that humans are more than they ever imagined." Ethan felt a sense of pride, but also a deep responsibility. The council, the princess, and the entire Orion cluster depended on him. Challenges would continue to come, but he knew that with courage, intelligence, and determination, humans could stand alongside the galaxy's greatest civilizations. And for the first time, Ethan realized that being human was not a weakness in the vast universe. It was a strength that could change the course of history. The day Ethan Clarke had been preparing for finally arrived. The Galactic Council announced a formal trial, one that would decide whether a human could legally stand as guardian to a royal heir. This was not a trial of crime, but of worth. It was older than most star systems and designed to test those who dared step outside tradition. The council chamber was filled long before Ethan arrived. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in rising tiers of seats, their attention focused on the central platform. The air carried tension, expectation, and quiet judgment. Some came curious. Others came hoping the human would fail. Ethan walked beside Princess Liara, his posture calm, his expression controlled. Inside, his thoughts raced. He had survived danger before, but never something like this. No weapons, no ships, no clever escape routes. Only words, choices, and consequences. Liara stopped before the platform and turned to him. "This trial was designed to break outsiders," she said softly. "Do not let them rush you. Listen carefully. They will test more than knowledge." Ethan nodded. "They'll test intent. And that's something I won't hide." They stepped forward together, the chamber quieted. The lead counselor, an ancient being whose species measured time in centuries, spoke slowly. "Ethan Clarke of Earth. You stand before this council as a proposed guardian to Princess Liara of Orion. This role grants influence, authority, and responsibility. Our concern is not your courage, but your judgment." Ethan met the counselor's gaze. "That concern is fair." The counselor continued. "This trial will consist of 3 evaluations: wisdom, loyalty, balance. You will answer truthfully. Any attempt to manipulate the process will be grounds for immediate removal. Ethan simply said, "Understood." The chamber darkened slightly, and a holographic scene formed around him. He now stood within a simulated star system. A planet burned red beneath him. The counselor's voice echoed. A colony world faces collapse due to environmental failure. Saving it will require diverting resources from another system, weakening its defenses. If you save one, the other may fall. What do you do? Ethan studied the projection. Many council members leaned forward. This was a classic test. No perfect answer, only consequences. He spoke carefully. I gather more information, not just numbers but people, population, adaptability, existing infrastructure. Then I act to minimize total loss, not preserve political appearance. A counselor interrupted. You must choose. I am choosing, Ethan replied calmly. I choose responsibility over pride. If one world can survive with guidance and adaptation, and the other cannot survive without immediate aid, then I help the one that cannot adapt, and I commit to rebuilding trust with the other. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some disapproved, others looked thoughtful. The simulation shifted. Now Ethan stood in a council chamber much like the real one. Princess Liara stood beside him in the projection. Armed figures surrounded them. The counselor spoke again. A faction offers you power. They promise stability if you surrender Liara's authority to them. Refuse and civil conflict will erupt. Accept and the princess becomes a symbol with no voice. What do you do? Ethan did not answer immediately. Liara watched him closely. Finally he said, I refuse. The counselor's eyes narrowed. You would choose conflict. I would choose honesty, Ethan replied. If peace depends on stripping someone of their future, it isn't peace, it's delay, and delay only makes the damage worse. A council member hissed softly, idealism. No, Ethan said, experience. Humans tried that path many times, it always failed. The simulation faded. Now came the third test. The chamber lights returned, but the air felt heavier. The counselor spoke slowly. Balance. The most difficult test. Another hologram formed. This time Ethan saw a familiar face. A human colony leader he had once worked with. The figure spoke. Our people need you. Orion politics are draining resources. Return home and leave this role behind. Earth needs its own. The illusion was perfect. Too perfect. Ethan's chest tightened. The counselor's voice echoed. You can leave. The council will accept your resignation. No punishment, no consequences. What do you choose? Silence filled the chamber. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. He thought of Earth, of home, of quiet skies and familiar gravity, of a life without constant pressure. Then he opened his eyes. I stay, he said. A wave of reaction spread through the room. Explain, the counselor demanded. Because responsibility doesn't vanish when it becomes difficult, Ethan said. And because Princess Liara didn't choose this position either. If I leave now, I prove every fear you have about humans. The illusion vanished. The council fell silent. Princess Liara stepped forward. The trial is complete. But before the council could respond, a sudden alert echoed through the chamber. Screens flared to life. A distant system burned. Gasps filled the room. Unscheduled fleet movement, an aide shouted. Unknown origin. Multiple vectors. Ethan stepped forward instinctively. This isn't random. The counselor turned sharply. Explain. This attack is timed, Ethan said. They waited for this trial. They expected division. Liara's voice was steady. Then we respond. Some council members hesitated. Authority is unclear. Ethan didn't raise his voice. Lives are clear. For a brief moment, tradition warred with necessity. Then the counselor spoke. Ethan Clark, you will advise. Princess Liara will command. Ethan nodded once. Together they moved fast. Ethan analyzed the attack patterns, recognizing familiar strategies. Not military genius, but coordinated pressure, designed to overwhelm response times. They want panic, Ethan said. So we deny it. spread our response, force them to chase shadows. Liara issued commands, fleets moved, defenses activated. Ethan coordinated communications between species that rarely cooperated. He translated not just language but intent, reframing orders in ways each culture understood. Hours passed. The attackers faltered. When the final report came in, the chamber exhaled as one. The threat was contained. The council reconvened immediately. No ceremony, no delay. The lead counselor stood. This trial has revealed more than answers, it revealed character. He turned to Ethan. You are not flawless. You challenge tradition. You disrupt systems. Ethan waited. But you protect without seeking control, the counselor continued. And you act when hesitation would cost lives. The counselor raised a hand. By majority decision, the council recognizes Ethan Clark of Earth as legitimate guardian to Princess Liara with full advisory authority. The chamber erupted, some in approval, some in anger, some in stunned silence. Liara turned to Ethan, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she smiled. Later that night, the palace was quiet. Ethan stood on a balcony overlooking the stars. The weight of the day pressed on him. Liara joined him. You could have walked away. So could you, Ethan replied. But you didn't, she said. Ethan looked out at the galaxy. Neither did you. They stood in silence for a while. The council will test you again, Liara said. This won't be easy, Ethan nodded. Nothing worth doing ever is. Far beyond the palace, stars burned steadily. The galaxy had just accepted a human not as a guest, but as a force. And it was only beginning to understand what that meant. The sun of Orion's central system cast golden light across the palace spires, and the entire cluster seemed to hold its breath. Ethan Clark stood in the council hall, gazing at the assembly before him. Today was different from anything he had faced before. It was not a crisis from rogue fleets, nor a betrayal hidden in palace corridors. Today, the council would test the final measure of his worth, not just as a human, not just as a guardian, but as a leader who could shape the fate of a galaxy. The hall was vast, its ceiling stretching high above in elegant arches. Light filtered through crystal panels, illuminating hundreds of counselors and observers from countless star systems. Each member's eyes were fixed on Ethan, their expressions a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and anticipation. Some were outright hostile, especially those who had never trusted a human in a position of power. Princess Liara stood beside him, calm and composed, radiating the quiet strength of royalty. Ethan felt a surge of responsibility. This trial would not only determine his status, but also the future of the Orion cluster itself. He drew a deep breath, steadying his nerves. Humans had a history of facing impossible odds. He would show that this moment was no different. The lead counselor, a towering alien with segmented armor-like skin, addressed the assembly. Ethan Clark has acted decisively in recent events, saving planets and uncovering treachery. Yet, it is not enough to act. Leadership requires understanding, judgment, and loyalty to the cluster. Today, he will be tested on all these qualities. The council will ask questions, present scenarios, and judge whether a human is capable of standing alongside centuries of experience and tradition. Ethan nodded, meeting the eyes of each counselor as best he could. I understand. I will answer honestly and act to the best of my ability. The first series of questions were about strategy. The council presented a hypothetical crisis. A nearby system faced sudden environmental collapse, threatening millions of lives. Ethan was asked how he would respond. His answer drew upon everything he had learned during his travels, his experience in coordination, improvisation, and risk assessment. I would first communicate with the affected planets to understand the situation fully, he said. Next, I would prioritize the most vulnerable populations, organize rescue and relief operations, and coordinate with neighboring systems to provide resources. If necessary, I would implement innovative solutions that may not follow tradition but would save lives. A counselor with bioluminescent skin flickered her light in surprise. You would disregard protocol, she asked. Ethan shook his head. Not disregard, but adapt. Protocol is important, but it cannot replace action when lives are at stake. Sometimes the rules must bend to preserve what is most valuable, the people of the cluster. Murmurs filled the hall. Some counselors whispered agreements, others bristled at the challenge to tradition. Ethan could feel the tension. Humans were often underestimated, but he intended to show that they could combine adaptability with intelligence and loyalty. The next portion of the trial tested judgment and morality. The council presented a complex scenario involving two planets. One was rich in resources but had a long-standing conflict with its neighbor. The other was weaker but dependent on trade. Ethan was asked which planet he would support in a negotiation. He paused, considering the consequences. The solution is not to choose one over the other, he said. It is to find a strategy that strengthens both, creating stability and fostering cooperation. Humans have a saying, the strongest path is the one that lifts everyone. Conflict resolution is not about favoring one side but about ensuring fairness and long-term survival. The council fell silent. They were impressed, though few admitted it openly. Ethan had demonstrated a human perspective, practical, empathetic, and solution-focused, without ignoring the complexities of alien politics. Then came the most personal test. A senior counselor, Turak, who had opposed Ethan from the beginning, stood and spoke sharply. All this shows ability, yes, but can a human be loyal? Can a being with no lineage, no duty to the Orion cluster truly protect its people? Prove that your allegiance is not to personal gain, but to the cluster itself. Ethan looked Turak in the eye. My allegiance is to the people of this cluster, to Princess Liara, and to the promise I made when I accepted this responsibility. I did not seek power, and I do not seek profit. My only interest is the safety, prosperity, and unity of those who depend on me. That is loyalty. The council murmured again. Ethan sensed that his words had struck some members. Loyalty, courage, and integrity. These were qualities the aliens respected above all, and humans often showed them in ways that defied expectation. As the trial continued, Ethan was presented with a series of real-time challenges. Communications from distant systems reported sudden disturbances. Rogue factions, seeing the cluster's perceived weakness, attempted to manipulate trade routes and alliances. Ethan sprang into action. He coordinated with Liara and trusted advisors to deploy relief and negotiation teams. He proposed compromises that satisfied both sides, while also preventing escalation into violence. Every decision had to be swift and calculated. Human creativity, he realized, was proving invaluable in a galaxy accustomed to predictable, rigid strategies. Halfway through the trial, the council revealed a hidden test, a simulated betrayal from within Liara's advisors. The human who had previously been removed as a traitor had a remaining loyal faction attempting to undermine the princess. Ethan was asked to detect and neutralize the threat. Using his skills of observation and deduction, he identified unusual patterns in communication and resource allocation. He traced them to the remaining faction and devised a strategy to expose their actions without causing panic or destabilization. During a council session, he presented the evidence calmly, explaining each step of his reasoning. The faction's attempt to manipulate Liara and the cluster failed, and the council was forced to acknowledge Ethan's vigilance and foresight. By the end of the day, the council had witnessed something remarkable. A human, with no prior experience, had acted decisively, ethically, and successfully in situations that would have challenged the most seasoned alien leaders. He had saved lives, resolved conflicts, and protected the integrity of the princess and her kingdom. Finally, the lead counselor addressed the assembly. Ethan Clarke has demonstrated qualities rare even among our most esteemed leaders: courage, intelligence, adaptability, loyalty, and foresight. While he is human, he has proven that humans are capable of standing alongside the greatest civilizations of this galaxy. It is the judgment of the Council that he be recognized officially as the guardian of Princess Liara and a trusted advisor in the affairs of the Orion Cluster. A wave of murmurs swept through the hall. Some counselors nodded in agreement, others remained cautious but silent. Ethan felt a sense of relief, but he also knew that recognition was not the end. It was a beginning, a starting point for humans to show their worth across the galaxy. Princess Liara stepped forward and placed her hand lightly on his arm. "You have exceeded even my father's expectations," she said. "Not because you are human, but because you act with wisdom and courage. Together, we will lead this cluster into a stronger, more united future." Ethan smiled, feeling the weight of responsibility settle comfortably on his shoulders. Humans were often underestimated, but he had proven that determination, intelligence, and integrity could surpass centuries of tradition and experience. He realized that being human was not a limitation, it was a strength, a unique lens through which challenges could be solved. In the following weeks, Ethan and Liara worked to implement reforms across the cluster. They encouraged cooperation between planets, strengthened defense protocols, and introduced innovative strategies for trade and diplomacy. Human methods, once viewed with suspicion, began to earn respect. Citizens and leaders alike noticed the change. Progress was faster, decisions were more inclusive, and crises were met with practical, effective solutions. Yet challenges remained. Rogue factions tested the boundaries of the cluster, and distant stars held unknown dangers. Ethan faced each one with the same calm determination, combining his human ingenuity with the wisdom he had learned from the Council and the guidance of Liara. One evening, as they reviewed reports from the outer systems, Liara turned to him. "Ethan, the galaxy is changing. Your presence here has shifted perspectives, not just among the Council but among the people themselves. Humans are no longer seen as outsiders. They are seen as partners capable of greatness." Ethan looked out at the stars, reflecting on how far he had come. From a simple explorer on Earth, he had become a guardian and leader, proving that humans could thrive in the vast, complex expanse of space. "It's more than I ever imagined," he said, "but I think it's only the beginning." "Humans have a way of surprising everyone, even themselves," Liara nodded. "Then let us face the future together. With courage, intelligence, and unity, there is nothing we cannot achieve." The stars above Orion shone brightly, as if witnessing a new era in the galaxy. A human had inherited the king's daughter, faced the council's scrutiny, and emerged not just unscathed but triumphant. He had shown that humanity, with its adaptability, creativity, and courage, could stand shoulder to shoulder with the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Ethan felt a profound sense of purpose. The trials had tested him, shaped him, and revealed what it truly meant to be human in a universe of wonders and dangers. He had proven that a single human, armed with determination and ingenuity, could change the course of history, inspire allies, and redefine what was possible. As he and Liara walked through the palace gardens under the soft glow of alien moons, Ethan realized that his journey was far from over. There would always be challenges, threats, and uncertainties. But he had learned that humanity's greatest strength lay not in technology or numbers, but in courage, creativity, and the unwavering will to do what was right. And in that moment, standing beside Princess Liara, he knew that the future of the Orion cluster, and perhaps the galaxy itself, was in capable hands. Human hands that could think differently, act boldly, and inspire hope across the stars. The galaxy had seen a human rise to greatness, and it would never look at humanity the same way again. Ethan smiled. For the first time, he felt not like an outsider, but like a part of something vast, extraordinary, and filled with infinite possibilities. And he knew that whatever came next, he and humanity were ready. The human inherited the king's daughter, and the Galactic Council didn't see this coming.